Hello and welcome to Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara, Week 5.
Hello.
We watched episode 21, which originally aired August 27th, 1984. And it starts out with Santana at Cruz's boathouse, and she's lost a lot of the blonde in her hair. She's gone back to a brown color, which seems to make sense since she's one of only two Latina women on the show and she had blonde hair. It seemed kind of weird.
I thought of them as more blonde highlights, but yes, she is a little darker.
They're a lot darker now. Yeah. And then, maybe they did that because the discussion that she had with Cruz was about how the sheets that she picked for his bed clash with all the blondes that he's going to have in there.
Well, I actually agreed with Cruz on this because she picked beige and gray. And I don't think beige and gray are really colors that describe Cruz at all. So apart from his concerns about the linens clashing with his potential girlfriends or ladies, I actually do think he had a good point.
Maybe she was in bland mode from Cece's party planning. So he says they need something in red. Mason arrives. He quips that every houseboat needs a decorator.
Must be said, neither Cruz nor Santana seemed particularly cheerful to see Mason.
Yeah,
It's
but
kind
I
of
guess,
got that effect on people.
I guess Cruz definitely has bought it then, if Mason's
I think that's his house now. Yeah.
So he says he needs her at the hotel to supervise the wall coverings being put on, even though they're being done, by other people. So she leaves. Says she'll meet Cruz at the stables the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Mason asks Cruz if he's bought a houseboat so he doesn't have to pay property tax.
A little jab in there.
At Santana's house later, after working, I guess, Mason puts down her job at the boathouse, and then she tries to get rid of him, saying she needs to get up early, and he says he needs another nightcap.
That seems to be his go-to line when he's trying to hang out with Santana.
So she says she doesn't serve nightcaps on weekends, and he then invites her for a reckless picnic the next afternoon. And she says she doesn't mix business with pleasure. So then he says he wants to know her passions and vice versa. I don't know if that's going to be happening.
She didn't seem very passionate about him in this episode.
So, back at the place where Joe and Dominic meet, in the parking lot, a car is about to run down Joe.
Mm-hmm.
It slams on the brakes just in time, and we see it's Augusta.
Which we did speculate in our last, when we were reviewing the last episode.
I must say I was extremely surprised that it was Augusta, even though we had speculated about it. I just did not think that was going to be who it was. So she comes up with a story about thinking Joe was seeing another woman, and that's why she was following him. He doesn't buy that and tells her never to follow him again. He's quite rough with her, too. Pulls her out of the car.
Yeah, he gets quite cranky about it.
So, he calls Dominic and says, okay, I haven't been, come back to the place. I got rid of whoever was following me. And then when Dominic gets there, he says it was Augusta. And Dominic says, I told you not to trust Augusta. She's a viper. So Dominic has the items that Joe had gotten from Channing's room. And they go through them. They talk about the pawn ticket that we've been seeing the whole time. Now, Joe had gone to the pawn shop and found that all the records from 5 years ago had been put away and they were in someone's basement.
Right.
So that may be something they follow up later. Dominic says that in the lining of the diary, she found the envelope that goes with the love letter, and it confirms that the letter was to Santana.
Right.
They talk about the entry in the diary that I think we glossed over last time, but it actually may have been important. It was Channing had written about a robbery where some gold coins were stolen from the Capwell mansion.
Yes, and Dominic zeroes in on the fact that this is actually kind of a strange thing to spend so much time writing about in a personal diary that's otherwise devoted to well, keeping Santana love letters to Santana and that sort of thing.
So they speculate that perhaps Channing broke into the house himself or something, some other odd thing like that. So
Yeah.
I guess this is important enough that they'll follow up with that in the future. So Dominic wants to keep the stuff a little bit longer. Joe asks for the letter and the envelope and the picture of Kelly.
Yeah.
So Dominic gives him that. But Dominic says to be careful of Santana because she was going to kill you at the bus depot, and somebody stopped her.
So we know now that Dominic knows about that episode that we saw first thing in the pilot.
Now maybe Dominic was at the bus depot.
Well, Dominic actually says, "I saw her. I was there."
So he didn't quite see whether it was Rosa or Mason, I guess, that stopped her, but probably.
He just says someone took the gun away. So we can deduce, that like that could be all Dominic saw, or that could just be Dominic being deliberately vague.
Now down in Los Angeles, Danny and Ted are at the Silver Urn restaurant watching Willard Holmby kissing Jade's hand.
Yes.
So Danny wants to run over there and bop him one, but Ted says it's better if they stay quiet and watch the whole thing so that they could be, available if things go really out of hand. The waiter brings them menus, and they realize they can't afford anything. They can barely afford to split a shrimp cocktail. So the waiter has some hilarious dialogue where he says, the smaller shrimp might go further if you're splitting one.
Yeah.
I'll bring some water with ice and
he's got their number.
Some bread.
Yeah, he reassures them that the dinner rolls are free, so they can partake in that.
So he seems to be okay with the fact that they're not going to order anything. But as Jade and Holmby leave, they shout out to Jade, possibly to ask her for money, I don't know, but it ends up getting turned around on them. I think Holmby realizes that they're probably concerned friends of Jade's that have been spying on them. So he orders an expensive meal on their behalf, which the waiter immediately puts in to the kitchen. And when Ted and Danny run to try and stop the order, he said that the Chateaubriand is already in the broiler. Yeah. So they end up eating it.
I guess they got a good meal, but
and they got the wine paid for by Holmby. So
that's true.
But then they were both underage, so it turned out just to be sparkling grape juice or something.
Yeah.
So. But anyway, they eventually have to admit they can't pay. Danny wonders if there's some sort of thing in the restaurant business where, they eat there for free that day, and the next day the waiter eats for free at the pirate shack.
It was a good try.
He does not go for it. So he agrees to allow Ted to go home and find their missing wallets that they claim they forgot. So Holmby drops Jade off at home and kisses her on the forehead. Says that they can do the screen test the next day. So
Jade still seems willing to do the screen test.
She seems to think the dinner went well. So.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we see Lakin's in L.A. and she uses a phone booth to call her father, and we hear his voicemail. So it's the first time we hear Lionel's voice.
Yeah.
So I had been surprised by that because the IMDb entry for Lionel Lockridge has his first episode, and of course it's not this one. So I guess that's his first physical appearance that's listed there. So this is a bonus. And she leaves a message saying she's in L.A. and then she finds Peaches, and Peaches says that, she can stay in her bedroom. In fact, she probably thought she'd be staying with her.
Yeah.
Jade comes home and tells Lakin about her evening and how great it was, and she says, old men are really good kissers.
Lincoln actually doesn't sound very impressed by this.
No, she says, does he want you for an actress or a girlfriend?
Yeah.
And then that leads Jade to contemplate, there's a lot of that going on in Hollywood, and it's probably how it's done, and she starts to contemplate on how far she would go for stardom.
Yeah.
Would she marry some old guy? So.
Would she kill for it?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So, then Ted arrives to get the money. He's happy to see Lakin, but he's rushing to try and get $60 together. They manage to find it in various pockets, and Jade says that she'll bring the money to Danny, and Ted and Lakin can, catch up.
Yeah.
So Lakin and Ted kiss, but she says she needs to tell him something, and she hems and haws about it for a few segments, and then says that Augusta is dating someone, and Ted doesn't seem that upset. And then she says it's Joe Perkins, and he shouts, "He killed my brother!"
Yeah, he sparks right into action then. So I'm thinking there might be some more fireworks between him and Jade if he continues to go on that sort of tangent when she's there, because she's very protective of her brother, of course.
Now Jade arrives at the restaurant with the money and tells off Danny for treating her like a kid, but later he arrives with a newspaper and points out an article about girls being snatched off the streets of LA to star in pornographic movies. And she counters with, "Well, I wasn't snatched. I had an appointment and I was taken out to dinner." So she's...
They're getting into semantics here, I think. Yeah.
And I think this now is enough of an incentive for Danny to trail Jade even further, no matter where she's going, because if this is something that could happen to her, I think he's going to want to make sure it doesn't. So.
Now, I think it'll be interesting to see if Ted will continue to be along for that trailing, or whether this news about Joe Perkins might move him in another direction. And also I'd be interested to see how long Lincoln stays down in Hollywood.
Yeah, it sounds like she's, sick of Augusta, so she might just stay with them for the duration of this summertime story.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to go back to school, come September, and it's already August, 27th? So, I don't know how much longer this summer storyline will last. Now, meanwhile, Augusta and Minx argue about Lakin. Minx, makes it clear that Lakin left because she was disgusted by Augusta's actions. And she tells Augusta that she gave Lakin permission to go to Hollywood.
Yeah.
And Augusta's upset by that, and Minx says, "Well, you're free to move out of my house anytime you please."
That's right. So, I mean, this is confirmation again that this is really Minx's house, and it's, I guess, Lionel, is that his name? Lionel's inheritance, I guess, from Minx. And really, Augusta is just staying there because of her ties to Lionel. It's not actually her house. She probably doesn't really even have any right to the money or anything if Lionel's not there. So I don't know if he gives her an allowance or something.
The $100,000 she was looking for.
Yeah.
Now, Augusta says Lionel has never taken their marriage seriously, and then she counters Minx's arguments by saying that Minx's marriage was never exactly based on fidelity either. She says that everyone knows about her husband's affairs.
Yeah. So
Minx, who's an elderly woman, says he was very passionate about beauty in all forms. So clearly she didn't have a problem with anything that T. MacDonald Lockridge got up to.
No.
So Augusta replies, "Bop, bop, 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 bop." The same line Minx had done a couple of weeks ago against Augusta.
That tends to be sort of how their conversations are ending with each other.
And Minx ends it with, "You're a very ordinary woman, Augusta."
Yeah.
So Joe pays a visit to Cruz and wonders if Santana and Channing had ever had a thing that he knew about, and Cruz has no idea. He says he had gone to Texas just right after the shooting, but he was not aware of anything between them. Which is interesting, because if Santana was 8 months pregnant...
I know, I was thinking that.
Was she she was serving at the party. How was she managing to hide that?
Yeah, I wondered that too.
So Joe shows up at Santana's house. She slams the door as soon as she sees who it is, but he says, "Oh, I have a letter written by Channing."
Mm-hmm.
So she opens it again, and she demands to read the letter, and he gives her the envelope, which has her name on it, and the letter's inside, and she reads it, and then before she can have a chance to insult him and say how she killed Channing, he grabs it from her and leaves.
Yeah.
So he's initiated something that he wants,
I actually, these two little scenes, the one with him and Cruz, and then later the one with Joe and Santana, I sort of wondered why Joe was playing it that way. I can understand, like, when he meets with Cruz actually offers to intervene with Santana and to ask him about it himself. And to me, that would have been the smart way to go, because Cruz and Santana have a relationship. They trust each other. And I think Cruz would have gotten a lot more information. But Joe is very adamant that he doesn't want Cruz involved. I guess he's trying to keep his friend out of it. But I'm just not sure what Joe actually accomplished with this short, abrupt visit with Santana, and unless it was just to sort of stir things up a bit, it didn't seem like he got any information or anything like that.
I think maybe he's going to leave her with it for a while, and maybe try contacting her again, and maybe questioning her, because he didn't really get anything back from her after she read the letter, and no information or even a discussion about the contents. So
the other thing I wondered about, as I've watched Joe in some of these scenes, so the early one where he and Cece have the confrontation, the scene, on the Capwell property, the scene early on where he and Kelly and Peter have the confrontation on the yacht, and this one with Santana, and not to mention the 2 times Joe's broken into the Capwell house. I've sort of wondered if restraining orders were not a thing in the 80s, because I think, if you think of most of the people involved in this story so far as we know, they think Joe is a murderer, and Joe is a convicted felon. So if he's really upsetting them, wouldn't they go to court to get a restraining order?
That's interesting.
I mean, that's what I would do.
Yeah, and Mason being the ADA, you'd think he would think of that.
Yeah.
Although Mason, as we've said, might have other secret plans that we don't know about, so he may not be suggesting it. So even though Joe's done a lot of dumb things, he does seem to have a plan. Like, we're always finding about things like slightly later that Joe has planned something, and it seems kind of oddball at first. So I guess we'll find out what his plan is with Santana.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that wraps it up for episode 21. We will see you again after episode 22 of Santa Barbara.
See ya.
Welcome back. We finished watching episode 22 from August 28th, 1984. So Lakin is packing up to go home as a result of the argument she had with Ted about Joe. And Ted apologizes. So she says she'll stay, and they kiss.
Yeah.
Later, Danny wants their leftover cereal, so he's still eating.
Danny does a lot of eating in this series so far.
And they have come up with a plan to find Jake Dodge, the police officer who kept arresting Peaches, and find him to surprise her.
I don't know if they have any thoughts that there might be some sort of romantic potential there, or just to give her a nice surprise.
Well, she had said she wanted to return the watch, but I think the way the whole thing played out, it seemed like they were definitely thinking of a romantic thing. So
that's
that
what
would
I thought.
kind of depend on him being single, I would think.
Yeah, and since they don't really know anything about him, or where he might be found, anything, they are taking a bit of a chance on that part.
So Peaches arrives, and Augusta phones, and Peaches says, "Oh, hi, it's me, remember me?" And Augusta remembers her as Peaches, even though she gave her real name the last time they talked. I'm not sure how Augusta knew her name was Peaches.
Maybe that's something that Lincoln mentioned.
Maybe when Lincoln got there the last time, they called Augusta again, and she told her to call her Peaches.
Yeah.
So Augusta hangs up. She's not really that happy that Lincoln is down there. Meanwhile, so the gang goes to through the phone books and everything to try and find a Jake, whatever his last name is, and they end up finding that he's a security guard at a movie studio that Ted knows well, because when he was a kid he used to play there when Sophia was acting in a movie there.
Yeah, and that turns out to be a nice little in for them.
So they actually talk Jake into giving them a tour, and a director shows up and says, "You're perfect," and Jade is like ecstatic.
Yeah.
And he walks right by her and picks Lakin out of the crowd.
Yeah.
To be the perfect extra. Now, it's only an extra. So really, extras normally, come in a carton of 12. And
yeah, it's not a prestigious movie role or anything. But it definitely takes everyone by surprise. And I don't think Jade really liked that very much.
No, she hugged Lakin to say, "Oh, congratulations." But her face kind of showed that was not how she wanted things to go.
No, and it's kind of interesting because when you think about it, of the four of them, Ted and Danny managed to land roles as fighters. I don't know if they were going to be kind of in the background or kind of what their fight role was going to be, but they managed to land that last episode of the episode before. And now Lincoln's landed a extra role. And the only one who hasn't landed a role so far in a legitimate movie has been Jade.
Yeah. It's not the summer she was expecting.
No.
So Jake is kind of interested in seeing Peaches, but he says, "Oh, she was a real looker." But I don't think he's thinking too far ahead on that. And they revealed that she stole his watch, and he thought it had been stolen by someone in lockup. So he hasn't really thought about her in years.
No.
Now, back in Santa Barbara, Kelly is stretching after probably a workout or riding or something. She's in a new set that is like a laneway that I suspect might be between the two properties.
That's what I thought, because there's two hedges, and she's
Augusta
in a
comes down the
between
road.
that. Yeah.
So it wasn't like at a country club or anything, because they immediately go into the mansion afterwards. So Augusta comes up and says, "Oh, Kelly, what kind of food does Joe like?" So she's taunting her with the fact that
rubbing
she's
it in.
having an affair with Joe. At home, Kelly says that she hates Augusta. Peter asks if she mentioned him.
Because Peter has his own concerns in this area, as we know.
Cece says they should fortify that fence and maybe have the dogs roaming around 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So then Peter and Kelly announce they've set the wedding date, October 12th. And Cece immediately says he's going to be in China and he can't change it, and why not have it at the end of November? So Peter's obviously a bit put off by that, especially the delay, not necessarily the
I think Peter
usurping their
wants
date.
this done and wrapped up as soon as possible.
So late November is the time when the sweeps are happening. In
That's
daytime
convenient too.
television.
Yeah.
So they always try to load their weddings in November, February, August, and May. So it's not too much of a surprise that a big wedding will be happening in November. Peter says that the wedding better rival Charles and Di's wedding. And Cece, I think, thinks that may well be possible, because he says Kelly's the first to get married and they're going to make it the biggest thing Santa Barbara's ever seen.
Well, if we compare that to the engagement party that we saw in the pilot, that was a pretty spectacular party.
And then Peter just mentions he'll see what he can do to get rid of Joe. He's been doing that a lot.
Yeah.
Augusta's been trying to reach Lionel by phone all morning.
Yeah.
And a package arrives. And she and Warren open it, and it's some sort of it's a carving, but they have to put it together, and I think it's a dragon or something.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd-looking little statue. So, and they don't. There's really no explanation of what it is. Is this something that Lionel made? Is it something that signifies a business deal he's working on? We don't really know any context, and I don't think they do either. They seem quite puzzled by it.
So she wants to just hide it somewhere.
Yeah, I don't blame her.
Now Peter arrives and tells her to stay out of his life and Kelly's, and get rid of Joe Perkins.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in one. He's sort of sounding like a broken record, I guess.
Yeah.
On the Joe Perkins side. And she follows up with, she's kept a journal of every time they made love. She knows exactly when and where. So this implies that they were having sex after he was with Kelly.
That's what I took from it as well.
Why would that matter? And he's kind of shocked by that. So he's now worried that she has something that will actually, he had kind of been telling Telly that he'd been with Augusta before, but if she comes up with these dates, he can't counter with that. Although, as we know, he's going to start plotting some sort of counter strike. So we'll see what he comes up with.
It did occur to me, too, in the scene before where he and Kelly and Cece are talking about Joe being a presence, I guess, at Augusta's. That, Cece was just, as you say, it was like, wow, we're going to just have to reinforce that fence. Really, Peter's the only one talking of running Joe out of town at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Because I guess, I don't know, maybe Kelly's told Cece that Joe's to stop pursuing her, and I guess that's his main thing with Joe. So. Yeah.
I think they just don't want to see him. I think that's the big thing for Cece and Kelly.
So Augusta says that whatever goes on between her and Joe is none of Peter's business.
Yeah.
And she's sick of him saying that she married Lionel for his money. So that's something Meeks probably had been saying too, but she's taking it out on Peter. And she says, he's a fascinating man and he makes a woman feel like a woman. He happens to be very passionate about traveling and a lot of other things. So she's basically taking Minx's response to her husband's philandering and making that her own as her explanation for why she puts up with that from Lionel. That's very interesting.
It makes us really interested to see what Lionel's actually going to shape up to be like when we finally do meet him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're really building him up to be something.
Yeah, because, so far he's got his mother and his wife, who we've seen are both very powerful women who both think the world of him, although he's obviously been leading a very unconventional lifestyle and has left them both alone with each other for what appears to be quite a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm wondering about the Lockridge finances.
Mm-hmm.
If he's off just playing in Bali, Augusta needs money.
Yeah.
And, who's actually bringing in money? No one's actually working. Warren's a surfer.
Warren is a lifeguard, so I guess he is bringing in a little bit of money from that.
Yeah, it's probably not paying the
property
taxes on that house.
No, but Augusta was trying to get him into the business a few episodes ago, remember? So
right, so
we don't even really know what the business is, though.
That's true. Well, maybe we'll find out when we finally see Lionel. And Peter says that he and Kelly are getting married in November. And stay away from me.
Which is ironic because Peter's the one who keeps coming to her.
And Augusta says, have you warned the others too?
Assuming she's talking about his
other girls
of women.
That now need to stay away from him.
Yeah.
So, and Peter says that she's being watched because Mason, had told him that he had been reported that Augusta had come and gone to Peter's place. she says, "Oh, well, next time I'll leave the door open then."
And I thought that was a really interesting statement because he is presenting the fact that Mason has him under surveillance as some sort of strength, whereas really he's just broadcast to Augusta that Mason suspects him of not being entirely honorable with his sister, and that he's basically got him under surveillance and is ready to pounce if he does anything wrong.
It's not going to make Augusta look bad in Mason's eyes.
No.
When they get caught, it will be Peter. So.
Yeah, so I thought that was a very odd argument to present.
So she also has a line, "Do you feel warmly welcomed into the Capwell family?" And then she finishes with, "Lionel with a cardiac arrest is more of a man than you are."
So now we really want to meet Lionel.
So Augusta tells Joe that she cares about him, and it's the first time she's been unfaithful in her marriage.
We don't believe that.
And then she says Lakin won't mind if she finds out how happy he's made her.
So we don't believe that.
She says she wants no strings, and then just when Lionel comes back, I'll try and make it work with him. So, I mean, Joe just kind of nods, quietly to all that.
Augusta is really playing him.
So she begs him not to leave, and he believes, so he unresigns, and they kiss. And Cece phones and says he wants her to come by.
Yeah.
She says, "You haven't invited me to your home in years." Santana is waiting in the stables for Cruz, and surprise, he brings Joe Perkins with him.
She's not happy about that. I don't really blame her.
She spends most of the time shouting at him.
Yeah.
Before realizing that he must be the one who broke into Channing's room.
Yeah.
So she talks about that and says Cece could have him removed, and she refuses to talk to him. And then once he leaves, she gets angry at Cruz. And one of the lines she says while she's shouting at him is, "Anyone's capable of killing under the right circumstances." Which makes me wonder if maybe she killed Channing.
Yeah, well, maybe he wasn't entirely faithful to her or something.
Cruz is like, "Why would you be looking for the killer? Why would he be looking for the killer if it's him?"
Yeah.
So she ends up going off riding on her own.
There's a lot of foreshadowing
She
around
hasn't
that.
really had her lessons yet. So
Yeah, and I think Cruz actually says to her when she's storming off, do you think that's a good idea? Because a lot is made of the fact that she really doesn't know how to ride a horse at all.
Mm-hmm. At the courthouse where Mason works, he is dictating a letter to his secretary and also mentions that she has gorgeous legs.
This is pre-Me Too movement.
So he's Me Tooing his secretary already.
Yeah.
Cece phones, and he tells her to tell him that he's in a meeting. And she says he wants me to give you a note, and he says, tell him I can't make it. So he basically hangs up on Cece. The phone rings almost immediately, and it's Santana, and he says, send her in.
Yeah.
So the secretary's actually jealous at this point.
Yeah.
So he says that Joe Perkins paid her a visit last night, so he knows that happened. And she says he wanted to ask me some questions about Channing. And then she also advises Mason not to have her followed.
Right.
So, and then switching into attempting to get a date mode, he asks if anything frightens her. And she says horses.
Horses.
And then he says he can teach her to be comfortable in the saddle.
What saddle we're not. It's where they're talking about horses, but it could be another saddle too.
Well, then she follows up with Cruz is already teaching her at Cece's stables. So Santana leaves and the secretary comes back, and she asks if they want to go on with the dictation. Instead, they have sex.
Yes. Locks the door.
Cece shows up and is very angry that Mason hadn't dropped everything when he phoned. And Mason says, they didn't give me the message. So she said, what kind of place are they running here? But so Mason's not willing to own up to the fact that he's the one who said don't.
Who blew him off.
Yeah.
But it's quite funny actually because Cece shows up just as Mason and the secretary are finishing their liaison.
They're rapidly getting dressed.
So they're busy scurrying around trying to get dressed and trying to look like they're working while Cece's on his way up the stairs.
Yeah. He said, "Oh, bring me some files." And
yeah.
So then Cece tells Mason that he wants him to move on that Lockridge waterfront property.
Yeah, this is intriguing.
Yeah, so there must be some waterfront property owned by the Lockridges. The Capwells have been trying to snag from them, and I don't know what Cece knows why this would be a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Is he aware of financial issues?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Augusta's been trying to get money to pay the property taxes or something on that land, although you'd think Minx would be the one controlling the Lockridge land, but I mean, maybe it's something Augusta brought into the marriage, and she wants to make sure they don't lose it or something like that.
Yeah. And I thought this scene, the way it ends, it does lay a little bit of a trap for Mason, too, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, Cece says, "If you can get that property, you'd make me very proud." And Mason says, "I definitely will." And then he says, "There's nothing worse than a man who falls short of his promises."
Yeah.
So he's building him up and slapping him down within 2 sentences.
But it also indicates to me the fact that Cece is coming to him and literally coming right to him with this, and then sort of sets it up as, this isn't going to be as easy as you think it is. Makes it sound like this is going to be a significant challenge, and it makes me wonder how this will play into maybe Lionel coming back, or what kind of dynamic's going to be formed when he does come back.
I mean, Mason's already working on getting Joe out of town and needling Cruz and going after Santana, so now he's going to be working on this waterfront deal as well, in addition to his real job.
Yeah.
So. And
plus he's also in charge of decorating the hotel chain, which is part of his work with Santana. But
that's right. So he's actually the assistant DA, and he's also works at the hotel, because he mentions specifically working at the hotel. So.
And somehow he has time to babysit Peter a little bit, too, on the job. He's already sat in 2 meetings with Peter.
So Mason decides this would be a good time to bring up the Cruz problem to Cece. He hasn't really mentioned to Cece yet that he's against Cruz, but he says you should cut him loose, and then, of course, he says the reason is that he's backing up Joe Perkins.
Yeah.
And Cece's reply is he admires him for speaking his mind.
Yeah.
So this is like a parallel to when Mason brought that coworker to the party, and Cece was very disapproving, and he said, "Well, you told me to stand up for myself." And now when Cruz does the same thing with possibly the worst case scenario, Cece's finds it admirable.
Yeah. And
so clearly Mason is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I did wonder, in Mason bringing that up to Cece, if that stems a little bit from the fact that the 2 men obviously don't like each other. Maybe it's partly a personality difference because they're very different people. But I also wondered if Mason is feeling a little bit jealous because Cruz obviously has this background with Santana. And obviously, even though they haven't been romantically linked, they are very comfortable with each other. There's an ease between them that Mason has never achieved with Santana.
All of their conversations are very stilted.
Yeah.
So, Mason hires a guy named Bob to find out everything he can about Lionel Lockridge.
Yeah.
So this deal obviously involves Lionel then getting the waterfront property. He obviously will need to be the one to sign off on it. So.
Yeah.
Now back at the stable, Cece brings in a saddle, and Santana tells him about Joe stopping by, and she says he just won't be stopped.
Yeah.
And Cece says he's got a whole battery of attorneys working on it, but if that fails, he may have to be made an offer to move out of state that he can't refuse.
Now, interesting during this conversation, and we touched on it yesterday, there's no mention of anyone ever getting a restraining order against Joe. It's more buying him off or, finding some legal means to get him back into jail. But I found it interesting there's still no talk of a restraining order.
So, Santana slips and gets angry about Brandon, and then apologizes to Cece and says she shouldn't have said that. So, I don't know if I don't know if Cece wants her to actually not care about Brandon, or pretend not to care about Brandon so that he's got power over her, because that would be that's kind of a weird thing to have happened. So.
Yeah.
So she switches gears and asks about the wedding date, and then goes off to ride alone.
Again, a little bit of foreshadowing, possibly.
Mm-hmm. So Cruz arrives in the main house with an oil report, and Cece tells him that Santana's gone riding. Then Augusta arrives, and Philip tries to announce her, but she wanders straight to Cece and says hi before Philip can finish announcing her. And she looks around and says nothing has changed. Still very old and very large. He says she looks well, and she replies that she's had a lot of exercise. So clearly she knows that Cece knows.
Yeah.
Thanks to Peter. So he says if she doesn't break it off with Joe, he'll do everything in his power to penalize the Lockridges. So she says she will not be intimidated. Yeah. So it's interesting, because she could have said, "Oh, I've been trying to get him out this whole time. It's part of my plan. Why are you?" But she doesn't. She immediately gets her hackles up and goes against Cece. Then on her way out, she says he should keep more control of Ted.
Yes.
And he says, "Well, Ted's in L.A." She says, "Yes. Well, so is Lakin." So Cece is actually quite shocked by that.
Yeah, he had no idea.
Now, Cruz and Kelly are in the stables, and Cruz mentions that Santana took Mustard out.
Which apparently
Kelly says
was
Mustard
not
is
a
very
good choice.
unpredictable.
Yeah.
So we've got Santana on an unpredictable horse. So I think that I can't ride and I'm going out on a horse thing is an obvious build-up. So Augusta decides to go to L.A. and just get Lakin herself. Warren says she's 17.
Yeah, Warren, the voice of reason.
Augusta says, "Don't tell me what to do." Then Joe enters, and Augusta tells him that Peter and Kelly have set a date for November.
Yeah, and he doesn't look very happy.
No. So he's going to have to try and move forward with this plan to make them not get married.
Yeah. I was going to mention, I think that was the cliffhanger, wasn't it? That was
it was kind of a low-key cliffhanger.
I was going to mention I really, really enjoyed the scene between Cece and Augusta, because you've got these two very strong people butting heads, and I think that's a scene I certainly was anticipating would happen eventually, and really enjoyed it. And the other thing I kind of wondered just a little bit when that scene was taking place was whether Cece and Augusta had ever had any sort of relations.
Mm.
Just because she mentions not having been in the house and the way it looked from the last time she'd been there. Now, of course, if she was a neighbor and they had been on good terms once, then that would have explained it too. But just given Augusta's history, I wondered if there might have been something more at some point.
Well, we're still wondering also if Augusta may have been at the party where Channing was killed.
That's right, because we don't really know at this point necessarily how far back this animosity goes, or really what started it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we know there's a Lockridge-Capwell feud.
Yeah.
But Augusta's, not a Lockridge, right?
No,
so
exactly.
Why would she hate Cece so much?
Yeah.
So they must have, I'm sure the Capwells must have done something to this generation of Lockridges as well.
That's right.
That makes, Augusta so upset. So. And that's about it for episode 22.
Yeah,
so we'll see you again after we've watched episode 23 of Santa Barbara.
See ya.
Welcome back. We have watched episode 23 of Santa Barbara.
Yes, a lot of interesting things happened this episode.
Original air date, August 29th, 1984. And at the Lockridge Mansion, a large crate arrives. And they open it up and find it's a sarcophagus.
Not at all what they were expecting.
No, and it's a gift from Lionel for Minx. And Minx says he sent me a coffin. So she's not entirely happy to have received that from her son.
She doesn't like the symbolism of that.
She wants Warren to go and chop it up, and first cold snap we have, it'll go up the chimney, she said. So, Minx says that she intends to stay around longer than any of them in the room. And then she adds, that affects you, Augusta, because you're not a spring chicken. So, Augusta just tells them to put it in the basement. And Joe and Warren just decide, from what we could tell, to stand it up in the living room so they don't have to carry it anywhere. So they probably take it out of the crate and put it up. And Warren actually warns Joe against Augusta.
Yeah. Actually, we got, in this little scene, or this little scenario, we got some really nice moments between Minx and Warren, which we hadn't seen before. And it was really the first time I think we've seen Warren and Joe have a real conversation as well.
Warren does tease him a bit by saying, oh, did you see the paper?
Yeah.
Wedding of the century in November.
Yeah.
And then Joe just replies, so Augusta already told me. So, I mean, Joe sometimes doesn't react to things like that. We don't know if he's upset or just doesn't care. It's kind of odd, the way he reacts to things like that.
He also seems to have a very standard sort of stance, which is sort of his mouth open and looking kind of skeptical. I don't know. Maybe that's just the way he does.
So Augusta mentioned that Lionel always sends gifts just before he's about to come home.
So a little bit of foreshadowing.
Exciting.
Maybe? Yeah.
And she's going to head down to L.A. She's getting an early start so she can get Lakin.
Yeah.
And Minx talks to Warren about getting a job. And he says, Dad never had a job, really. And Minx says, well, Lionel is a Renaissance man. And so Warren says he's a Renaissance lifeguard.
Yeah.
So, and then he also mentions, for the first time, that he met some guys at work who are going to let him in on a real estate deal. And Minx says, on the beach?
Yeah.
So there's some dodgy thing. I wonder if this is related to Mason's plot to get some land from the Lockridges, or if this is an unrelated thing, or it's a different group trying to get the same land or something. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
It could be a tie-in. It's kind of interesting because it does show us a slightly different side of Warren than we've seen before as well. I mean, up till this point, his life's really revolved around the beach and just sort of hanging out and doing his lifeguarding. This is the first time we've really seen this sort of ambition from him.
Yeah. Maybe he just hasn't found something that really interests him.
Yeah.
So down in Hollywood, Lakin is being an extra in a restaurant scene.
Yeah, doing quite well at it, apparently.
Like every movie set I've ever been on, her three friends get to hang around on the outskirts and watch. But Ted runs in after a take and says she's going to be the next Deborah Winger. So I know directors love that. So Danny and Jade talk to Peaches about, Danny and Jade talk to Jake about Peaches, and finally Jake agrees that he will meet Peaches the next day. He's a little bit reticent because, he doesn't think they really have anything to meet over. So Danny and Jade go back home first, and Danny jokes that Sylvester Stallone phoned at one point.
Yeah.
And someone else that I can't remember, some other celebrity. Robert Redford, that's the other one that called. So, and the phone rings again, and Warren calls to warn them about Augusta.
Yeah.
So this kind of throws them into a state of fright, because Augusta's a very imposing person, and they talk to Peaches about how she's got a killer Doberman.
Mm-hmm.
So Augusta arrives, immediately demands to know what the sleeping arrangements are, and
Yeah.
try to show her that no one's sleeping with anyone, and Lakin's actually staying in Peach's apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and Peaches, takes her over to her apartment to show her where Lakin sleeps. Then later, Ted and Lakin arrive, and they go to Peaches, and as Danny opens the door, or Peaches, whoever opens the door warns them that Augusta's there.
Yeah.
So Ted actually takes a step back in the hallway before Augusta can see him, and Lakin comes in alone.
Yeah, that was probably a good idea.
So later Ted asks Lakin to stay longer, but she says her dad's coming home, so she's going to go home, and then they wonder why they didn't go out sooner. They both decide they're idiots.
Actually, the scene with Augusta, it actually went a little bit differently than I would have predicted, because I assumed Augusta would come down, shake things up a bit, grab Lincoln, and go home. But Lincoln stands up to her, tells her she's not leaving until she wants to.
She says she does have to report to the set again tomorrow, and she's gonna do that. So
Augusta actually leaves empty-handed, which surprised me.
I mean, I think she's trusting that Lakin will come home the next day.
Yeah.
So, now back at the Capwell Mansions, Santana has been missing for hours, and we get a sense of how really big the Capwell property is. Cece calls Mason and demands he deploy search and rescue, and they better be there in 10 minutes with helicopters.
Yeah.
And throughout the episode, everyone in the family and the search and rescue people are searching the grounds, and no one can find Santana. And at one point, Mason suggests perhaps she's fallen in a ravine, which neither Cruz nor Cece finds amusing.
Yeah.
And then later suggests maybe she went out shopping, but then the horse returns on its own with some injuries. So they feel the horse probably fell, and Santana's probably lying somewhere. So Cece decides they better go tell Rosa and Ruben, 4 hours later.
Yeah.
And I guess they go to Rosa and Ruben's house, he and Kelly. Don't know if they live, far away from the Capwells. I get a feeling Ruben, the way he was dressed, maybe he's a gardener. I wonder if he's the Capwell gardener.
Yeah, maybe.
They both work for the Capwells, possibly. Anyway, Ruben goes to get his boots on immediately to go out and find Santana. And we see in the middle of nowhere, Santana's been lying unconscious all episode, and she finally wakes up as it's getting dark, and animals are starting to howl and make noises, and the wind's starting to gust up.
Yeah.
So she seems to have injured her left leg, and uses a piece of wood to drag herself over to some kind of shed that's falling apart to get a little bit of shelter. So.
And we also, during the whole search, when different characters are kind of going in and out looking for Cruz and Cece, and Kelly's involved, and of course Rose and Ruben. We also have a kind of curious little scene as well where Kelly gets ready to leave and runs into Joe. And Joe just suddenly pops up, offers to help with the search, basically tells her to think twice about marrying Peter, and then he kind of disappears. He doesn't seem to actually do any searching.
Yeah, he offers to help, but then she says no, so he...
Yeah.
So maybe it was just an excuse to talk to Kelly.
Maybe.
I hear Santana's missing. So.
Yeah. So that was kind of just an odd little interlude between
His line to her is, "Don't get married to Peter just to prove you don't love me."
Yeah.
So then Joe goes to meet Dominic, and Dominic says Joe didn't get everything from the room because there's a secret panel in Channing's room where Channing used to hide things. And of course, Joe's wondering, why does Dominic know so much about
and so are we,
Capwell inner workings, I also want to know why Dominic cares so much about him and Kelly, too.
Yeah.
Because Dominic seems to be still thinking that they could get back together. So Joe does manage to get Dominic's license plate number, though, as Dominic leaves the parking lot.
Yeah, so maybe we'll find out a bit more. I mean, whoever Dominic is, they definitely have a very intimate understanding of the Capwell house and the Capwell family.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mason is drunk for part of the episode. The best conversation he has while drunk is about is with Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he starts talking about Santana and Cruz, and maybe Cruz wants to put another notch on his bow because they've kind of started talking about him as a superhero, and they make jokes. He says you can almost hear the air quiver.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they start talking about Peter, and Mason says, if Peter's not perfect, I'll run him out of the family.
Mm-hmm.
He makes an our man Flint joke. He says, I think your man Flint has ambitions. And then at least Joe Perkins is out of your life.
Yeah.
That was a disaster from day one, he says.
Yeah.
So Kelly says, I don't think you know how really rude you are sometimes, because obviously, even though things aren't going well now, she was in love with Joe for however long, 5 years ago. So,
and really, when you think about it, I think especially when it comes to Peter, Mason's concerns are valid. But when you think about it, Mason hasn't exactly had a lot of great relationships himself, so it is a little bit rich for him to be criticizing Kelly's choices, and especially in, of course he's drunk, but in such a sort of mocking way.
It just occurs to me, they talk about Joe being in prison for 5 years, that his trial must have been awfully quick.
Yeah, it must have been very cut and
Channing
dry.
died 5 years ago. He went to prison for 5 years. I mean, I guess he was in prison during the trial, too, and maybe that counted toward his 5 years.
Maybe, yeah.
But it sounds like things probably went very quickly, especially if Mason was already, I think he was already working as assistant DA back then. Maybe we'll find out in the future as that backstory gets explored if he was actually involved in the prosecution.
Well, it occurs to me, though, that CC, with all of his money and influence, maybe facilitated that process a bit, too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one thing that Jade mentioned when they were talking to Peaches about how scary Augusta is, they start talking about that whole family being nuts, and she says there's a rumor that Mr. Lockridge's father used to talk to the peach trees out back. So that's, I guess, T. MacDonald Lockridge, Minx's husband that they're talking about. So some eccentricity in the family mentioned.
Yeah.
So next we see Augusta at the beach bar, and Warren is working a party there. I think he's serving to make some extra money. Seems to be not a private party, though, because Augusta's there. It's an odd place for her to hang out, but, she probably doesn't want to be home with Minx and the sarcophagus.
No.
She has been home, because she says to Warren, I thought you were going to get rid of that sarcophagus and put it in the basement. But she's come back there for the evening, I guess. Yeah, without Lincoln. It's just her and Minx in the house.
Yeah.
So she's having a drink, and then a well-dressed man with an English accent comes in, and he's staring at Augusta. And when she's standing up at one point, he takes his cane and starts rubbing her hip with it. And she says, "Excuse me, sir." And he ends up asking her to dance, and they do. And she says her husband's dead, which is quite funny. And then he kisses her, and Warren spots that and comes and punches him in the jaw.
Yeah.
Before he realizes, Dad! So we've been introduced to Lionel Lockridge, finally. After all this time, was it everything you thought it would be?
Well, apparently Lionel and Augusta like doing a little bit of role-playing, because it looked like as soon as he came along and I guess delivered a familiar line, they kind of went into these roles together. But you could tell from Augusta's eyes that there was something familiar. She kind of knew what role she was supposed to play in this. So.
Yeah, and she's been expecting him to show up at some point.
Yeah. And from all we've heard about Lionel, he's kind of got a quirky sense of humor and his own way of doing things. So for me, it wasn't actually surprising he would choose this sort of odd way of coming home.
Mm-hmm. Now Lionel's being played by Nicholas Coster,
Oh.
who we know from the In Other Worlds that we've been watching from 1980 as Robert Delaney, the father of Clarice's baby.
Okay.
And if you remember when we met Marie Wallace at Shadowfest in Terrytown, she mentioned that when she was on Somerset, she was paired with Nick Coster as that same character, Robert Delaney, because Somerset was a spin-off of Another World. So I think his character was on Somerset till it was cancelled, and then they brought him back to Another World for a while, probably to wrap things up story-wise, I guess. And anything else about this episode?
Not that I can think of.
This is a Wednesday episode, so we will be back after we watch Thursday's episode.
Maybe we'll find out who that license plate belongs to.
Mm-hmm. And we got a new set with the Andrade house.
Right, yeah, we did.
All right, we will see you after we watch episode 24. Bye.
Bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 24 of Santa Barbara, originally aired August 30th, 1984. Mm-hmm. So 1 month after the first episode aired.
Oh,
so
we've made it through the first month.
Into month 2.
Yeah.
And you had wanted to talk about something from the last episode when drunk Mason and Kelly are having their talk.
Yeah. I just wanted to make note of the really nice shot they do during that scene when Kelly and Mason are talking. And they actually do a continuous shot, and they basically take us through the entire set of the Capwell home, and we follow Mason and Kelly down this long hallway and then into the little atrium sort of area. And it's just a really beautiful shot, and it provides much more of a sense of being in the Capwell Manor.
They walk down the back wall of the set, which normally just looks like a big cluttered mess.
Yeah.
There's not really any doors there.
Yeah.
But it sort of ends with the door to the study, I believe, or the hallway to the study, or whatever that is. I thought that was really cool to see more of that set, and they would have had to have, the camera operator probably in a narrow gap between the back wall and all the many pillars that are in the Capwell mansion. A lot of columns, so that was really impressive.
It's a little more almost cinematic than your standard multi-camera setup.
I guess the director wanted to get some action going in there. I mean, it is a pretty big set.
It is. It's huge.
Now, the search for Santana continues. It's the next morning, and Cece is in the chopper.
Yep.
They've gone around the property 6 times, and he says go around a 7th.
Yeah.
So Santana, meanwhile, has come out of her makeshift hovel.
Yeah.
And just as she spots the helicopter, she also spots a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she doesn't manage to keep it from biting her until just as Cece arrives. It bites her on the foot, and he manages to shoot it with his shotgun.
Yeah.
And carry Santana back to the helicopter. Back in Hollywood, Danny and Jade are realizing in the morning that Ted and Laken haven't come home.
They've obviously been out for some sort of a romantic night, but we don't know quite where they went.
Jade postulates they went to a motel.
Yeah.
They don't really give up too much information other than that they didn't get any sleep.
And they didn't end up at Peaches, so actually we don't know where they were.
No, they're not saying too much.
Yeah.
There's some metaphors thrown around. But
Yeah.
Peaches arrives, and she's decided today's the day to teach Laken and Jade how to put on punk makeup. So they have a lot of streaks on their cheeks when they finish up with that.
Anyone who saw a rock video in the 80s will probably recognize some of this makeup.
Now, at this point, Peaches seems a bit concerned about Jade's visit to the producer's house.
Yeah.
She asks Jade to leave her the address.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's it's a house in the Hollywood Hills, but yeah, Peaches finally is twigging that maybe something's not right. Maybe she's read that article that Danny read,
Yeah,
or
maybe.
maybe Danny's had a talk with her about it.
So we've gone from Jade doing a screen test in this guy's hotel room after meeting him, for a midnight session, I guess just before that, to her being invited to what sounds like a kind of cool Hollywood pool party in the Hollywood Hills.
Mm-hmm. Like I'm imagining
Yeah.
something out of the Entourage movie.
Yeah.
Just a whole bunch of people around a pool
Yeah.
having a good time and lots of bigwigs there.
Yeah, yeah. So it does sound fun and cool. If we weren't already a little bit concerned about this guy having seen him on, I guess, two separate occasions, and
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, Peaches is a little bit suspicious, and Danny and Ted, of course, are very suspicious, and Lincoln doesn't look too excited about it either.
Mm-hmm. So while they're in Jade's bedroom doing makeup, Jake Dodge arrives with some flowers for Peaches. So when they angle Peaches towards the door and have her open it with him there, she screams.
Yeah.
And he gives her the flowers, and she gives him his watch back.
Yeah, and they seem to have a really happy meeting, and maybe some good things coming for the two of them. We
We'll
hope.
see how it continues.
Yeah.
Now, Jade insists on taking a taxi to her meeting. She won't let Danny drive her to that house.
Yeah.
When she gets there, it's really obvious. It's not what you expected.
No.
There's just three really sleazy guys hanging around the pool deck, and Holmby saying, these guys have a lot of connections, and why don't you get changed into your swimsuit? So
Or not.
yeah,
Or
so
not, if you
he
don't feel
sends Jay. Now Jade's was expecting to be probably with 100 people, and
Yeah.
had brought kind of a revealing swimsuit, and we see her in the cabana there trying to angle it differently to sort of cover herself up,
Yeah.
because she realizes she doesn't want to be sitting there basically 90% naked in front of these guys. And there's a phone in there, so she calls Danny immediately.
Yeah.
Says she thinks she's made a big mistake. So
Yeah, and it has to be said, not only are there no people there, there's no catering, little appetizers, there's no music, there's no fun bar. It's kind of, from the camera angle anyway that we see, it almost looks like a little patio in a hotel. I mean, it's just these two.
I think we saw a pool when we saw Holmby on the phone, but then later in the close shots, he's just hanging out near a hot tub.
Yeah.
So
this, to me, this doesn't sound like it's a really great address in the Hollywood Hills. It might be in the Hollywood Hills, but it's not. It's not a mansion or anything nice like that.
now, the one good thing is that Danny's hanging around with an ex-police officer, so
Yeah.
hopefully he'll bring Jake in, guns a-blazing.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
We'll see.
So anyway, she has to go out and meet those guys, and hoping Danny will arrive soon. And they start touching her and
Yeah.
really getting creepy very quickly.
Yeah. And suggesting ways she could maybe lose some of those clothes she's wearing.
Manny knows a lot of musicians if she wants to be a singer.
Yeah.
So back in Santa Barbara, Lionel is lying on the floor of the Lockridge mansion, and Augusta's about to dump a vase full of water on him to wake him up, but he wakes up on his own, and Warren is there with her, and
Yeah.
they have some banter, and Augusta's kind of annoyed with him, basically the whole episode.
Yeah.
He's trying to, grab her, and she's resisting. He bites her on the bum, which she doesn't particularly care for. So Lionel goes to visit Warren at the beach bar with a
Mm-hmm.
gift, some kind of a
It's a little
mask.
Yeah.
A lot of kind of racist talk about natives that
Yeah.
belongs a lot further back, one would hope, than 1984. But
Yeah, it's sort of more of a, I don't know, Cecil B. Rhodes kind of adventure thing from the 19th century.
so all the girls at the beach bar seem to be kind of giggly. I don't know if that's over Warren or over Lionel. It's not quite clear to me. So Warren and Lionel talk about Jade.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, they talk about Lincoln. And Warren fills him in a bit on what's going on down there, and Lionel's not too concerned.
No.
They talk a bit about Joe having been hired, and at first Lionel thinks Minx hired him to piss off Cece, but it turns out it was Augusta. And then Lionel quickly puts two and two together about that relationship. So goes home to ask Mom how she liked her sarcophagus. Minx did not like it at all. At one point when they're looking at it before Lionel comes home, Augusta says, "It's Lionel's way of saying he wishes we were all dead." So anyway, he kind of smooths things over with Minx, saying it was just, he's planning to donate it to a museum. It's not meant to be her final resting place.
No.
And they talk about Lincoln and Ted. And I guess Lionel's not too concerned about Ted Capwell. He doesn't specifically say that he knows about Ted or that he thinks he's a good guy, but he's not that concerned. Then Minx and he also talk about Warren, and Minx is talking about how he's a lot like him.
Mm-hmm.
Warren is learning to be a wastrel, she says.
Yes.
He's a young version of you. But Lionel says that Warren's got a good head on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And Minx says he has no ambition except maybe chasing girls. So, but Lionel's not too worried about that either.
No. Lionel's seems very laid back so far, and just seems intent on enjoying life.
Now, Minx seems to know a bit of what's going on with Lakin, because she said, "Do you approve of young Ted Capwell sneaking into Lakin's room at night?" I guess that's from when she saw him climbing down the trellis that one morning. So.
Yeah.
And Mason, he gets his report from his private detective.
Mm-hmm.
A full rundown of Lionel from the time he landed to meeting Augusta at the beach bar.
Yeah.
So that guy managed to trail Lionel, and I guess Lionel didn't notice. So.
Or care, maybe.
And then now Mason wants him to do a full background check on the beachfront property that Cece asked him to get.
Very interested.
He wants him to go all the way back to the Mission Land Grant of 1792.
Yeah.
When Cedric Lockridge married into the family.
So I'm wondering what family that was.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe there was an even older family in town that owned some land, and then Cedric Lockridge came into the family, and it became the Lockridge family maybe after a generation or something.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Back then, I guess, the land and property all went to the man when he married a woman, so maybe he somehow was the first Lockridge in town and ended up, through marriage, getting all of the assets of some other family that was there before.
Maybe. Maybe we'll find out a little more.
1792 is quite far back. So
it is, yeah.
Not really in living memory of any of the current people.
I don't even think California would have been particularly settled at that point.
Did it belong to Spain at one point?
I think so.
We'll research that when we do our spotlight on Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Mason, it says he's hoping to give the land to Cece on his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure when Cece's birthday is. We know Brandon's birthday's coming up, even though Santana's already blown out the candles. The notes I saw say his birthday hasn't actually happened yet, so it's coming up. So maybe Santana wasn't quite as pregnant as we thought.
Maybe.
In July 1979. So Santana is now in the hospital, and she's very groggy, maybe from the snake bite, maybe from some anti-venom, maybe from whatever else they gave her.
Yeah.
For her probably swollen ankle. So anyway, she ends up grabbing CC and kissing him, which you looked away for a second and you think you may have missed it. So
I think I saw just the end of it. Yeah.
And so that was sort of the cliffhanger.
That was the cliffhanger, yeah.
So we'll find out more in the next episode, which will be episode 25, at the end of week 5.
So we didn't see Joe or Kelly or Dominic
Peter.
Did we see Cruz?
I don't think he was even around. And we saw Rosa and Ruben because Mason was with them and Cece phoned them from the helicopter when he found Santana. But other than finding out Santana was okay, they didn't really do anything.
Yeah. So a lot of characters missing from this episode.
Mm-hmm. Now this week I'm going to do the spotlight on William Phipps, who plays Jake Dodge.
Oh, cool.
And I thought, I'm not going to find anything on this guy. And I was shocked by his long history that he has in stage and screen, and that he was actually the voice of Prince Charming in Cinderella.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be an
very interesting
spotlight, more interesting than I expected. And we will see you after we've watched episode 25 of Santa Barbara.
See you later.
This week's spotlight is on William Phipps, who played Jake Dodge on Santa Barbara. Phipps was born on February 4th, 1911, in Vincennes, Indiana. Phipps appeared in plays as early as grade school. He majored in accounting at Eastern Illinois University, but abandoned his degree in 1941 when he hitchhiked to Hollywood to work on stage and in film. He studied at the Actors Lab in Hollywood alongside Russell Johnson, known for playing the professor on Gilligan's Island. Before Santa Barbara, Phipps appeared in hundreds of movies and TV shows such as Maverick, Men into Space, The Twilight Zone, Peter Gunn, Hawaiian Eye, 77 Sunset Strip, The Green Hornet, Wild Wild West, Mod Squad, Mannix, Macmillan and Wife, The Rockford Files, Charlie's Angels, Cliffhangers, and Lou Grant. Many of his early roles were in 1950s science fiction. His most well-known role was Hood Number 2 on Batman. He also voiced Prince Charming in Disney's Cinderella. Phipps appeared in 6 episodes of Santa Barbara as former police officer Jake Dodge, starting with episode 23 and ending with episode 33. After Santa Barbara, Phipps continued to appear on television in shows such as Dallas, Hill Street Blues, and Empty Nest. His last credited role was in 2000. Phipps passed away on June 1st, 2018, in Santa Monica, California, at the age of 96.
Hi, welcome back.
Hello.
We've just watched episode 25, originally airing August 31st, 1984. Santana kisses Cece.
Mm-hmm.
So that put some ideas in Cece's head.
Yeah, I think Cece quite enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. And then over the course of the day, Rosa, Ruben, Cruz, and Mason all come to see her.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, they talk about, Cece talks about her horseback riding with her. And he says Cruz is a good teacher, but somehow she ends up turning it so that Cece's going to end up teaching her.
And Santana lays it on quite thick in this conversation where she's complimenting CC on his riding abilities and how powerful he is, and and how much she wants to be like the Capwells.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She invokes Channing a little bit too.
Yeah.
So Peter and Kelly arrive at the hospital to check on Santana. Mason diverts Peter because he wants Peter to find out where the Lockridges keep their papers, specifically their deeds and escrow documents. So Peter says I can't just search the house, but Mason's pretty adamant that he should just ask Augusta, where do you keep your valuables, such as your papers? So.
Since, as Mason points out, Peter does have a bit of a history with Augusta.
later he says he could just get a search warrant and send his people in, since
Mm-hmm.
Joe Perkins is, a suspicious character, and they could find the documents Mason wants.
Yep.
So, Joe comes to visit when everyone's, out of earshot, and asks Santana if he knows anyone who might have hated Channing or fought with him, and Santana says, well, you. Then he wonders if she remembers the break-in. She says, of course I do, it was in all the papers. And wonders if Channing knew who broke in, and if he told her. She says, well, maybe, but I don't remember. So, but she really kind of wants him out.
She's not happy at all to see him, and she just wants him to go away, basically.
Kelly shows up and chases him out.
Yeah.
So Rosa and Santana have a talk about how Cece's been sitting there for hours.
Mm-hmm.
And Rosa thinks Santana is just trying to get Cece to tell her where her son is.
Yeah.
So.
And from Santana's reaction, I would say that Rosa's not really wrong. I mean, Santana says to Rosa, well, you would do exactly the same thing if you were me.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of had a sense that Santana does have genuine affection for Cece as well. I think she genuinely has a certain amount of respect for him, even though she doesn't like the way he handled the situation with her pregnancy. So
I personally am not sure at all. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Then later, Cece watches her sleep, and then leaves her in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
In Los Angeles, Danny arrives at the Hollywood Hills mansion to rescue Jade.
Yeah.
Holmby comes to the door and said, oh, she doesn't want to see you. So, very suspicious. So Danny breaks into the house and comes bursting into the backyard wielding a golf club.
Yeah.
Only to find Holmby is putting sunscreen on Jade's back and everyone's having a great time.
Yeah, Jade seems to be actually enjoying all the attention now.
Yeah.
And
She
is
sends-
quite happy.
She sends Danny away, says, I don't need you, and tells him, oh, I overreacted when I called
Yeah.
you. So, Danny's not too happy about that, but he leaves. And then Jade goes into the hot tub with all the men. She's at first a bit worried, but they say, oh, only one of us likes girls, so.
Yeah, yeah. And
That's-
it is true. A couple of them do have a sort of Freddie Mercury in the 80s vibe, but who knows?
And so did the entire office staff of Moonlighting.
Yeah, that's
from the
true.
same era. So.
That's true.
Then after she leaves, he says, well, see you again next week. And then he tells the guys, we're reeling her in.
Yeah.
So they are dodgy, as we all suspected.
And then she is a little tiny bit contrite when she arrives back at the apartment, and Danny's obviously furious with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a little bit hurt too that she kind of blew him off. And I thought that scene was really interesting because by the end of it, she's talking about, going into the hot tub with them and everything. And I kind of felt Danny was looking at her and thinking that he didn't really like this side of her that was coming out, and didn't really like who she was now as much as he had before.
Yeah, that could be. She shows him some scripts to prove that everything's up and up.
Yeah.
Lionel comes in to see Augusta in Lakin's bedroom weighing her pigeon.
Mm-hmm.
And Lionel's kind of, flabbergasted by this odd behavior, but Augusta says it's very important to weigh it.
Mm-hmm.
So Augusta phones Lakin and says she must come home today.
Mm-hmm.
And then she and Lionel talk about Ted Capwell. And, Lionel's still not that concerned.
Lionel seems fine with it.
So Lakin does come home, and the whole family's hanging out, and Augusta's got a maid that we didn't know existed, or maybe a cook, or both. who's prepared some hors d'oeuvres, and she's forcing them on everyone. Augusta's making sure everyone has some, and then Warren tries it and says, "Are these chicken?"
Mm-hmm.
And Augusta says no, and Mink says, "Oh, it's definitely rabbit. I know rabbit." She goes, "No, no." And then Lycan says, "Well, what are they?" He says, "It's pigeon."
Mm-hmm.
So Lycan runs upstairs to see, and her pigeon is gone.
Yeah.
So she is furious with Augusta.
Yeah, she comes storming back and throws a plate, and Augusta basically tells her this is payback for her not obeying her and coming home.
Leaving without her permission, staying there. So, she's not happy about that. Now Minx quizzes Lionel about his travels and what he was doing, and he said that he was working on a deal in Johannesburg around synthetic diamonds. And says, "Well, last year it was rubies, wasn't it?" So she says, "Are we actually making money?" And the answer is no. So she says, "Well, how much have you squandered?" He says, "Not enough." So he's not too worried about the family finances.
But he's not happy with what's just happened with Lincoln.
No.
Neither is Warren. Neither
Everyone's
is Minx.
angry with Augusta.
Yeah,
for what she's done. So Lincoln tries calling Ted. There's no answer. So she ends up calling Kelly Capwell next door and saying, I've had a huge fight with my mother. I can't stay here. Can I stay with you tonight?" And Kelly's, "Oh, sure, no problem." Lincoln says she feels a bit awkward, but Kelly says, "Oh, it's not a big deal."
Now that was really interesting because we've never seen any interaction between them at all, as far as I know.
I don't recall them ever seeing each other.
So it's but they obviously must have known each other a little bit, maybe through school or something. They must have some little bit of history, because as soon as Kelly picks up the phone and Lincoln introduces herself, she says, "Oh yeah, hi," So they're familiar with each other, maybe just as neighbors. Who knows?
At one point, a few weeks ago, we thought the Lockridges maybe didn't go to the same school, but actually, someone specifically said today that Warren did go to Lyman Prep and was a student of Peter's.
Yeah.
So it's very unlikely, though, that Joe went to that school, and Joe and Cruz went to school together, so they might have gone to a different school. So
yeah. But at any rate, Kelly and Lincoln do seem to know each other a little bit, and Kelly's perfectly happy to help Lincoln out. So it sounds like Lincoln's heading over to the Capwells, and I'm sure if that happens, I'm sure that'll have all sorts of interesting ramifications.
I wonder, is Lincoln going to go back to Hollywood, or
maybe? She did have a very successful little stint as an extra. She and Ted are pretty young. They're probably a little bit young to elope, but who knows? There might be something like that.
I don't know how long the gang can stay in Hollywood, because, having a chunk of your cast in a different city, it's obviously got to be for a short-term storyline, and it's, for the summer, and it's August 31st, so...
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, there's, with Ted, there is the threat of military school hanging over him as well when he comes back. If Lincoln does end up having a prolonged stay in the Capwell house, what kind of dynamics does that bring into play? I mean, would Peter make a play for her, for example? Could be interesting.
I guess we'll find out.
I'm sure Augusta would have all sorts of things to say about it as well.
Yeah.
As would Minx and Lionel.
It's definitely an unexpected thing that happened. So.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see characters that haven't interacted before suddenly interacting. You get some new dynamics.
And it's nice to see characters grow in unexpected ways, too.
Yeah, because, I guess I guess they're finished high school, right? Or
I'm
are they
not clear.
still in high school? Because if they're finished,
They seem to all be 17.
yeah.
But, in some jurisdictions, students go to school for another year. Sometimes that's optional, too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they're talking about military school for Ted, so is that for grade 12, I guess?
Or grade 13, which exists in some places.
So then, yeah, it's because I guess Lakeland's not really thinking about college or anything at this point. So
yeah.
maybe she does still have a 1 year of high school.
We'll find out. September's coming soon.
Mm-hmm. Joe calls Dominic to set up a meeting, and when he hangs up, he says, "Tonight, I find out who you are." And we saw Dominic's, place again with that one desk with the phone that's very well decorated. So
yeah.
It does look rather swanky.
It does, and significantly, the statues seem to involve horses.
Interesting.
It's a big horse head statue and a sort of smaller horse statue.
Mm-hmm. So Joe hides under the stairs at the place where he meets Dominic. Dominic comes down the stairs. Somehow Joe thinks he can sneak past, and he does. He tiptoes back up the stairs. I don't know how Dominic avoids seeing him or hearing him. And then Joe's plan is to sneak into the trunk of Dominic's car. And I'm thinking, couldn't you have hidden in the parking lot? Waited for Dominic to go inside? Like, that seems to be a better plan than risking being seen and heard by Dominic,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It seems kind of goofy. But, Joe gets the trunk opened. So
I find Joe's approach to things is often a little bit convoluted. Doesn't always seem to take the most obvious or cunning approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because he's, when he's trying to interview Santana, he's very brusque with her. It's like, he's not even trying to get on her good side or anything.
No.
It's very odd.
It is, and especially, as we've said before, as far as these characters are concerned, he is a convicted murderer.
Mm-hmm.
So being brusque and being assertive to the point of aggressive is not going to be a good way to approach people who genuinely think that you're guilty of a violent crime.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know where Joe thinks he's going to go in the trunk of Dominic's car, because didn't he already find out where Dominic lived? So I'm not quite sure. Does he think Dominic's going to take him to a different location? And will he jump out in time to see where he goes? I don't know.
And I'm assuming he didn't lock himself in while he was closing the lid.
Yeah, that's probably not part of it.
I don't know enough about car mechanics to know if there's a mechanism on the inside you can unsnick.
But he has also not really... We have no idea how he's going to get back into Channing's bedroom to look at that secret panel either. So, I don't know if Dominic will come up with another magic thing that only an insider would know about and say, oh, yes, there's a tunnel right into Channing's room. You don't even need to worry about the alarm. I forgot to tell you that last time. So, yeah, we'll find out when that happens. I mean, I assume Dominic will be very annoyed with Joe. I'll bet Dominic pulls a gun on Joe again.
Yeah, we're seeing certain repetitions with the Dominic and Joe relationship, I think, and that this is the third time now Dominic's basically sent him into the Capwell house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We will see what happens.
We'll see.
And that is it for week 5 of Santa Barbara. And we are starting September with the Monday show.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe the summer's ending soon for the LA gang.
Yeah.
And we will be back next week for week 5 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
See you later.
Do you want to start over?
Yeah.
Why are you so much bigger than me?
Because I'm sitting forward. Do you want me to sit back?
Yeah.